They say every man has a breaking point. Mine came the night Bridget looked me in the eyes, those same eyes I'd once thought held my future, and said 6 words that tore my entire world apart. "Ryan, I need someone on my level, 4 years. 3 jobs, 20-hour days. All gone, just like that." I didn't even react at first. I just sat there at that restaurant table, the roses I'd bought wilting in my hands, the champagne still cold in the bucket. She was perfect that night, her designer suit crisp, her nails manicured, her future shining bright. And me? I was the man who built her dream, only to realize I was never part of it. But what I didn't know then, what I couldn't have known, was that losing her would be the single greatest thing that ever happened to me. Because 3 months later, on a rainy Tuesday night, while delivering chicken soup to a dying woman in hospice care, I discovered something that would change everything, something my mother had left me before she died, something worth $40 million. My name is Ryan Decker, and this is how losing everything I thought I wanted showed me the real meaning of worth, love, and legacy. I worked 3 jobs for 4 years straight. Construction during the day until my hands bled through my gloves. Warehouse at night loading trucks until my back screamed. Food delivery on weekends. Driving through rain, snow, ice, whatever it took. Every single exhausting hour, every drop of sweat, every muscle ache was for one purpose: putting my fiancée, Bridget Ashford, through law school. When she passed the bar exam, I thought we'd made it. I thought all those sleepless nights were finally worth something. But that night at the restaurant, surrounded by her polished friends and expensive wine glasses, she didn't see me as the man who lifted her up. She saw me as the weight holding her down. "Ryan," she said, her voice calm, clinical, like she'd rehearsed it. "You've been amazing, but I need someone on my level now. 4 years of my life, gone." And I walked out of that restaurant with nothing but a crushed bouquet, an empty wallet, and a heart that felt like it had been ripped out by hand. My story didn't start there, though. It started long before Bridget. I was born in a small hospital on the east side of town. My mother, Maria Decker, died the same day. Complications during delivery that nobody saw coming. My father, Harold, raised me alone, a mechanic. A quiet man with grease under his fingernails and love in his heart. He taught me that dignity doesn't come from wealth, it comes from effort. He died when I was 21, a car accident. One moment he was fixing transmissions in the shop. The next, I was standing alone at his funeral with nothing but his old toolbox and a lifetime of lessons I didn't yet understand. By the time Bridget came into my life, I was desperate for purpose. Desperate for someone to believe in, and she was that someone. At least, I thought she was. Beautiful, ambitious, always in control. She had her 5-year plan mapped out like a battle strategy. Top law firm, BMW, penthouse apartment overlooking the skyline. She spoke about success like it was oxygen, like she couldn't breathe without it. And me? I was the guy who believed love could outrun class, ambition, and money. "You're my foundation," she used to tell me. We'd lie in bed, the sound of the city leaking through the window, law books scattered across the floor. "I couldn't do this without you, Ryan." I believed her. God help me, I believed every word. So when she got accepted into law school, I didn't hesitate. I dropped out of community college, gave up my business degree, and picked up a construction job with Brennan Construction. That was the first step down a road I didn't know would nearly destroy me. The foreman, Walter Henning, ran his crew like a general. He'd bark orders from sunrise to sunset, his voice booming across the site. But beneath that steel shell, he had a good heart. Maybe he saw something of himself in me, a young man willing to grind himself into dust for a dream. "Decker," he'd shout as I stumbled in, half dead from the night before. "You look like death warmed over. When's the last time you slept 8 hours?" "Sleep's for people without goals," I'd tell him, strapping on my hard hat. He'd grunt, shake his head. "Goals or a death wish, son. You better figure out which." After construction came the warehouse. 10 p.m. to 6 a.m., the graveyard shift, The supervisor, Marcus Webb, was a former Marine who ran that place like a drill camp. He respected hustle, never asked why I still had concrete dust in my hair or why my hands trembled during the 3 a.m. lull. He just nodded and said, "Keep stacking, Decker," and I did, every weekend. I drove for Quick Bite delivery. I knew every alley, every shortcut, every streetlight in that city. Some nights I was so tired I'd park in an empty lot between deliveries and close my eyes for 5 minutes, the food still steaming beside me. My friend Jerome Washington worked construction with me. He'd see me stumble onto the site, red-eyed and barely conscious. "Man, you're going to kill yourself for that girl," he'd say, shaking his head. "She's studying." I'd defend her. "When she becomes a lawyer, we'll both benefit." "It's an investment in our future," Jerome would just sigh. "Investments are supposed to pay dividends, brother." I laughed it off then. I don't anymore. Bridget never saw the worst of it. She never saw me throw up from exhaustion behind the scaffolding. Never saw me sleep in my truck because the 30-minute drive home would waste time. She never saw me count out exact change for ramen noodles because every spare dollar went toward her textbooks, her prep courses, her tailored suits. But I saw her success. I celebrated every milestone. When she got her internship at Danner & Klein, I worked double shifts to buy her a briefcase, leather, engraved with her initials. When she passed her mock trial, I made dinner for her and her study group, smiling through the fatigue. When she passed the bar, that was supposed to be our night. I traded shifts with 3 drivers just to get the evening off. Bought roses from an actual florist, not the gas station kind. Splurged on champagne. I walked into that fancy Italian restaurant, Venenzo's, heart pounding, hands shaking. She was there at the table with her law school friends, laughing, radiant. Her friend Penelope was the first to notice me. She wrinkled her nose. "Oh," she said loudly, "the delivery boy is here." The whole table laughed, and Bridget didn't correct her. She didn't even look at me right away. I should have seen it then, the way her shoulders tensed, the flicker of shame in her eyes, but I didn't. I was too blinded by love, by pride, by the fantasy that I mattered. After that night, I was done, emotionally wrecked, spiritually empty. My apartment, our apartment, was just 4 walls and memories now. 700 square feet on the 4th floor of a building whose elevator hadn't worked in 3 years. The ceiling leaked. The radiator clanged like a dying drum. But it was quiet enough for me to think, and that's when fate, or maybe something divine, stepped in. 3 months later, I got an order through Quick Bite delivery, chicken soup, and saltine crackers. Total, $6.49. Normally, I'd have been annoyed. The drive was all the way across town for a tiny tip, if any. But I took it anyway. The address, Rosewood Gardens Senior Living. Hospice wing, I knocked expecting a nurse or an aide. Instead, I heard a weak voice call, "Come in." Inside, an elderly woman lay in a hospital bed surrounded by faded family photos. Eleanor Caulfield, her chart said. When she saw my name tag, her eyes widened. Tears filled them. "Maria's boy?" she whispered. "You're Maria's son?" I froze. Nobody had spoken my mother's name in years. She reached for my hand, her fingers trembling. "She told me, one day you'd come. She left something for you, Ryan. Something she couldn't give you herself." I didn't know what she meant then. But those words, they cracked something open inside me, because in that moment I realized, not all love vanishes when someone dies. Some love waits. It lingers. It protects. Before I tell you what she gave me, before I explain how a dying woman's confession led me to $40 million and a legacy I never knew existed, you need to understand what life had turned me into by then. I was 32 years old, living paycheck to paycheck in a studio apartment with water stains on the ceiling and a radiator that clanged all night. My body was wrecked from labor, my hope gone. Every morning at 4 a.m., my alarm vibrated under my pillow so it wouldn't wake Bridget. I'd sneak out of bed, stiff, aching, exhausted. In the kitchen, I'd make her breakfast, eggs, toast, coffee in her favorite Yale Law mug, and leave a note. Crushing it today, beautiful. Love, R. By 5, I was on the road again, chasing a dream that wasn't even mine, and I'd do it all again the next day, and the next. The construction site became my second home. We were building a new children's hospital on the south side. Sometimes, when my hands bled into the concrete, I'd think about the kids who'd get better there. That thought, that maybe my suffering built something that healed others, kept me going. At lunch, Jerome would slide half his sandwich toward me. "Shanice says you're too skinny for this work." I'd laugh, too proud to admit it was the only real meal I'd have that day. That's what my life had become. Endless labor, fading purpose, silent sacrifice. And yet, all of it was leading me to that one night. The night Eleanor Caulfield looked at me with tears in her eyes and said, "Your mother loved you more than life itself. She made sure you'd be taken care of, even if she never got to meet you." Her words hit harder than any punch, any heartbreak. Because in that sterile hospice room, surrounded by machines and fading breath, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Hope. Eleanor reached for the drawer beside her bed and pulled out a sealed envelope. Yellowed with age, my mother's name written in elegant cursive. That moment, that trembling hand, was the beginning of everything. The beginning of a story that would uncover hidden bank accounts, secret letters, a legacy my mother built in silence while the world forgot her name. The beginning of a journey that would show me what real value looks like, the kind that can't be measured in degrees, or cars, or penthouses. Because what I was about to discover wasn't just money, it was truth. And once I opened that envelope, there was no going back, not for me, not for Bridget, not for anyone. To be continued. They say heartbreak doesn't kill you, it just teaches you who you really are. But standing in that restaurant parking lot, with a $200 bottle of champagne going warm in my hands, and the woman I'd built my life around telling me she needed someone on her level, I could have sworn I felt my heart stop. 4 years, 3 jobs, every ounce of strength I had poured into her dream, all gone with one sentence. But the truth, that night wasn't the end of my story. It was the spark. The moment everything I thought I knew about love, loyalty, and worth burned to ashes, and from those ashes, something far bigger, something buried in my family's past, was about to rise. My name is Ryan Decker. And this is how losing the woman I thought I couldn't live without led me straight to a $40 million secret my mother left me the day she died. "I want to earn this myself," she told me early in our relationship. "I want to prove I can do it." Back then, I thought she meant she wanted independence. But looking back, what she really meant was she wanted me to prove she could do it. I met Bridget at a coffee shop near the community college I was attending before my dad died. She was hunched over a thick political science textbook, highlighting with such intensity that she'd torn straight through the page. I slid an unopened highlighter across the table. She looked up, smiled like I'd just saved her life. "My hero," she said, and that was it. I was gone. Bridget Ashford, the woman who would define and destroy the next chapter of my life. My dad, Harold Decker, was my entire world after Mom died. He never remarried, never even dated, as far as I knew. Your mother was it for me, he'd tell me on the rare nights he had a beer in hand and nostalgia in his eyes. Some people get one great love, and Maria was mine. He worked at Polson's Auto Repair for 20 years. Came home every night with blackened hands and oil-stained clothes, telling stories about stubborn carburetors and broken transmissions. We lived in a 2-bedroom rental with a roof that leaked when it rained and a furnace that needed coaxing every winter. But it was home. It smelled like motor oil and hope. He taught me the kind of lessons they don't put in books. That hard work isn't just what you do. It's who you are. That you show up, even when you don't feel like it. That you take care of the people you love, even when it costs you everything. When I brought home good grades or helped him fix a neighbor's car for free, he'd smile. Tired, proud, content. Your mother would be so proud of you, he'd say. She was smart like you. Always reading, always dreaming about making things better. I never knew the whole truth about her. He never mentioned where she came from. Never said a word about the Blackwood family name, or the fortune that was waiting for me. Maybe he thought keeping that secret was love. Maybe it was. When Dad died, I was 21, and completely unprepared for the world without him. The funeral alone wiped out his savings and my college fund. I remember standing there at the cemetery, the sky gray, the air cold, the casket lowered beside my mother's weathered headstone, and Bridget, she was there, holding my hand, whispering, "I'm here. You're not alone anymore." And I believed her. For the next 4 years, I lived by that promise. I built my entire existence around her success. When she studied until 3 a.m., I'd quietly make her coffee. When she cried over exams, I'd hold her. When she doubted herself, I'd remind her she was brilliant. Her study group often met at our apartment, and that's when I realized just how different our worlds really were. Preston, Gabriella, Thaddeus. Trust. Fund kids who thought hard work meant choosing which family summer house to stay in. They'd complain about European vacations being too long. They'd joke about which parents' firm they'd join after graduation, and there I was, serving them snacks I'd bought with overtime pay. One night, Gabriella turned to me, her voice dripping with polite curiosity. "So, Ryan, what are your plans after Bridget passes the bar?" I opened my mouth, but Bridget answered before I could. "He's exploring his options," she said quickly. "Ryan's very entrepreneurial." Entrepreneurial. That was her new code word for unemployable. Before Dad died, I had dreams. Real ones. I was studying business management, planning to open my own auto repair shop, a place that offered fair prices and second chances. I wanted to call it Harold's Haven. A tribute to the man who taught me everything that mattered. But those dreams were buried with him. Replaced by one single purpose: getting Bridget through law school. That was my life. Construction, warehouse, delivery, repeat. 7 days a week, 4 years straight, all leading to that night. The night everything came crashing down. It happened in September. Cold rain, the kind that soaks through your jacket and straight into your bones. I was on the construction site when Bridget texted, "Results are in." I passed, followed by a flood of champagne emojis. I actually whooped out loud, right there in the mud and concrete. Jerome, my buddy on site, clapped me on the back so hard I nearly fell over. Even Walter Henning, our no-nonsense foreman, cracked a smile. "Your girl passed?" he asked. When I nodded, he did something nobody had ever seen him do. "Take the rest of the day off. Decker, paid. You've earned it." I drove straight to Mindy, Morello's Wines. Downtown, the kind of place where they look at your boots before they look at your face. I spent $200 on a bottle of real French champagne. Money I'd been secretly saving by skipping lunches for months. The woman behind the counter wrapped it in white tissue paper and smiled. "Special occasion." "My fiancé just became a lawyer," I said proudly. "Lucky woman," she replied, adding baby's breath to the roses I'd bought next door. And I believed it. I believed she was lucky. By the time I reached Vincenzo's, the kind of restaurant with valet parking and more forks than cents, I'd convinced myself that night was going to be the start of our new life. I'd showered until the hot water ran out, put on my best blue shirt, the one I'd worn to Dad's funeral, scrubbed at the permanent dirt under my nails until my hands stung. When I walked through the doors, It felt like stepping into another world. Soft lighting, polished marble floors, conversations about stocks and mergers instead of bills and shifts. I spotted her instantly. Bridget. Sitting in the center of the table, surrounded by her classmates looking like she belonged on a magazine cover, her blonde hair pinned perfectly, her new black dress immaculate. She looked nothing like the girl who used to fall asleep on my chest with sticky notes stuck to her arms. Her study group was laughing. Preston with his perfect jawline, Gabriella in pearls, Thaddeus in his designer suit, Penelope with her sharp tongue and sharper eyes, and then she saw me. Or rather, Penelope did. Her voice sliced through the restaurant. "Oh," she said loudly, lips curling. "The delivery boy is here." The table fell silent, and in that silence, Bridget didn't say a word. She didn't laugh. She didn't correct her. She just froze. I stepped forward, forcing a smile, holding the roses behind my back. "I wanted to surprise you," I said, pulling them out. "Congratulations, baby. You did it." She took the bouquet, carefully like it might stain her dress, and set it on an empty chair. "Thanks, Ryan," she murmured. Nobody looked at me. Preston checked his watch. Gabriella fiddled with her napkin. I stood there, the champagne sweating in my hands, realizing I was the only one in that room who didn't belong. "Ryan," Bridget said finally, standing. "Can we talk?" She didn't wait for my answer. We walked through the lobby in silence. Her heels echoed against the marble floor, sharp and certain. The valet attendants watched us. The lawyer and the laborer, the future and the past. Out in the parking lot, the rain had stopped, but the air still felt heavy. She crossed her arms, that familiar stance that always meant trouble. "Ryan," she began, her tone clipped, professional. "We need to discuss our future." I tried to stay calm. "I know things will change now," I said. "You'll be busy, but we'll make it work. I can adjust my schedule, maybe go back to school." She laughed. Not kindly, not softly. It was the kind of laugh that cuts clean through your chest. "Ryan, look at yourself. Look at us. Do you really think this was ever going to work long term?" Her words didn't make sense at first. I blinked at her, still holding that champagne. "What are you talking about? We're getting married. We have plans." She sighed the way she used to when I didn't understand some legal term she was studying. "No, Ryan," she said. "You had plans. I had necessities. There's a difference." The world spun. "Necessities," I repeated, barely recognizing my own voice. "I needed support through law school," she said simply. "You provided that, and I'm grateful. But I'm entering a different world now. Partners at law firms don't marry food delivery drivers. Associates don't bring construction workers to firm galas. It's not personal, Ryan. It's practical." "Practical?" I stared at her, this woman I'd built my life around, and realized she'd already left me, long before she said it out loud. "4 years," I whispered. "I worked 3 jobs for 4 years." She looked at me, eyes cool, steady. "That was your choice, Ryan. I never forced you to." I felt something inside me fracture, not break, not shatter, just shift, like a wall giving way to something I'd never seen before. And standing there, under the golden glow of parking lot lights, holding the last remnants of a life I'd built out of love and exhaustion, I finally understood what my father meant when he said some people get one great love, because mine had just ended. But what I didn't know then was that another love, one that had been waiting my entire life, was about to begin. A love written into my bloodline, locked away in secrets my father took to his grave. And 3 months later, when I delivered soup to a dying woman who somehow knew my mother's name, that's when everything changed. That's when I learned the truth about who I really was, and what my level truly meant. It's strange how a single sentence can break the sound barrier of your life. You said I was your foundation, she told me. And I remember the rain, clinging to her lashes, the yellow parking lot lights turning every drop into glass. Then she smiled, calm, cruel, certain. Foundations get built over, Ryan. That's what they're for. Then she pulled off the engagement ring I'd worked 2 years to afford, working double shifts, selling my father's tools, even pawning his old watch that still smelled faintly of oil and sawdust. She pressed the ring into my palm like it was payment for services rendered. Keep it. Maybe you can get something nice for yourself. Then she turned away, back toward the restaurant, toward the warm laughter and clinking glasses, toward the world that had room for people like her and none for me. The door closed behind her with that soft, expensive whoosh. And just like that, my entire future disappeared in a soundproof room filled with people who'd never known what it meant to bleed for someone. I stood there in the drizzle, holding a bottle of champagne I couldn't afford and a ring she didn't want. My heart didn't even know which hurt more. Through the window, I saw her sit back down beside Preston Whitfield, that perfect jawline golden boy with the Rolex and family firm waiting for him. They laughed at something he said, and Bridget smiled like she'd just been released from a sentence. Her new BMW was parked 3 spaces from my dented old truck. Same color, different worlds. That drive home. I don't think I'll ever forget it. No music, no talking, no thoughts, just the windshield wipers sweeping away the evidence of everything I'd ever done for her. The champagne Road shotgun, still wrapped in its tissue paper like a trophy for the dumbest man alive. When I opened the door to our apartment, I knew before I turned on the light. She'd already been there. Half the closet was gone. Her law books vanished. The furniture we'd built from Craigslist scraps remained like ghosts of another version of us. On the kitchen counter, a note. The lease is paid through the end of the month. Good luck, Ryan. Good luck. 4 years of my life. 4 years of working, until my hands blistered, of cooking, cleaning, cheering her through exams, sacrificing my dreams so hers could breathe. And all I got was good luck. I sat on that second-hand couch, surrounded by silence and leftover heartbreak, and popped the cork on that $200 champagne. The first sip burned, bitter and sharp, like a cruel joke. I drank straight from the bottle, toasting the fool who thought love was a transaction, who believed that if you built someone else's dream, maybe they'd let you live in it too. They don't. 3 months later, I was a ghost in my own life. I'd moved into a shoebox studio above a Chinese restaurant on Belmont Street. The air always smelled like soy sauce and sesame oil, the kind of scent that sticks to your clothes, your skin, your soul. The radiator clanged every night like it was protesting existence. The bathroom faucet dripped relentlessly, and the single window stared at a blank brick wall. But it was mine. Nobody could leave me there. I quit the warehouse job, cut down my shifts on construction. Even Walter Henning, my foreman, the closest thing I had left to a friend, tried to talk me out of it. Decker, you're my best worker. Don't let that woman ruin you. I told him I wasn't letting her do anything, that I was just tired. But that wasn't the truth. I was emptied. So I kept the one job that didn't require a heartbeat, delivering food for Quick Bite delivery. No talking, no thinking. Just GPS coordinates and quiet. My supervisor, Hector Ramirez, was 5 feet of pure energy and compassion. A former boxer turned manager, a man who'd seen life throw punches and learned to roll with them. You used to smile, Hermano, he said one night as I picked up a delivery. Now you look like you're attending your own funeral. Some days it feels like I am, I told him. He handed me the order slips and shook his head. Then find the guy you were before her. Don't let her steal that too. But I couldn't remember who that guy was, because every version of me had been built around someone else. When Mom died, Dad needed me. When Dad died, Bridget needed me. And when Bridget left, There was nobody left to need me. Then came the Tuesday night that changed everything. It was mid-December, cold enough that my breath fogged inside the truck. The order came through my phone. 1 chicken soup and 1 pack of saltine crackers. Delivery address: Rosewood Gardens, Senior Living, Hospice Wing, Room 247. The name on the ticket: Eleanor Caulfield. I almost declined it. The drive was long, the tip would be pennies, and I just wanted to go home. But something made me hit accept. Maybe it was the word hospice. Maybe it was the idea of someone's last meal. Or maybe I was just tired of saying no to everything. Rosewood Gardens was the kind of place that smelled like money trying to mask decay. Perfect lawns, shining. Windows, a fountain that probably cost more than I'd made in 2 years. The hospice wing was tucked away behind a quiet corridor, the air heavy with antiseptic and soft piano music. The receptionist, Bethany, gave me a look of practiced kindness. "Room 247, she said softly. "She's very ill. If she's sleeping, just leave it on the nightstand. She rarely eats anymore. I think she just likes to feel normal." Normal. The word hit me. I nodded and walked down the hallway lined with lives in their final paragraphs. One room held an old man watching baseball with the sound off. Another, a woman knitting with trembling hands. A couple sat holding hands, one awake, one barely breathing, and then there was room 247. I knocked. A frail but clear voice answered, "Come in." Eleanor Caulfield looked like she'd been carved from porcelain and sorrow. Maybe 90 pounds soaking wet. Her white hair, thin but brushed with care. The lavender bed jacket she wore looked hand-knitted, and her eyes, those sharp, ice-blue eyes, were still alive. "Dinner delivery," I said gently. 1 chicken soup and crackers. I set the bag down on her nightstand and turned to leave. But she was staring at me. Not just looking, studying me like a detective piecing together a mystery she'd chased her whole life. Then her eyes widened. Her hand flew to her mouth. "Wait," she said, her voice trembling. "Your name tag. What's your name?" I glanced down. "Ryan. Ryan Decker." And then everything changed. Her eyes filled with tears so fast it startled me. Her frail shoulders began to shake. For a moment I thought she was in pain, but then she whispered, "Are you Maria's son? Maria Decker?" The sound of my mother's name froze me. Nobody had spoken it in decades. "My mother was Maria," I said slowly. "But she died when I was born." Eleanor began sobbing in earnest, reaching out with trembling hands. "Oh, my dear boy," she gasped. "Sit down. Please, you must sit down. I've been looking for you. For 35 years. I sat, numb, the room spinning. "Looking for me? Why?" She wiped her eyes and tried to steady her breathing. "I was her nurse," she said finally. "Eleanor Caulfield, though back then I was Eleanor Brennan. I worked labor and delivery at St. Mary's Hospital. Your mother, she knew something was wrong. Her voice trembled, but her gaze never left mine. She could feel it, Ryan. The doctors said everything was fine, but Maria, she knew. 2 days before you were born, she pulled me aside and handed me an envelope. She made me swear, on everything holy, that if anything happened to her, I'd keep it safe until you were old enough to understand." I could hear my heartbeat in my ears. "What kind of envelope?" I asked, my throat tight. "Legal documents. A letter. And this." With shaking hands, Eleanor reached into her nightstand drawer and pulled out a small safety deposit box key, attached to a chain. The metal gleamed faintly in the dim light. "She said you needed to be at least 30 before you'd understand. You're 32 now, aren't you?" I could barely breathe. "How do you know that?" Her eyes softened. "Because I've kept track of you. I've always kept track. You were born December 18th, 1992, at 3:47 a.m. I was there, Ryan. I held you when you took your first breath. Her voice broke, while your mother took her last. The air in the room thickened. I couldn't move, couldn't speak. Eleanor reached for my hand, her skin paper-thin but warm. Your father, Harold, he was shattered. He held you and sobbed, then vanished. Changed addresses. Changed phone numbers. I tried to find you both for years. I even hired private investigators. But he'd gone off the map completely. Of course he had. He was protecting me. From what? I asked quietly. Eleanor looked down at the envelope trembling in her lap. From your mother's family, she said. From the Blackwoods. That name hit me like static electricity, tickling something deep in my memory. Dad had never mentioned them. Never mentioned anyone. But also, Eleanor continued, from this. She lifted the envelope with shaking fingers. Your mother wasn't just any woman, Ryan. She was an heiress. The heiress. And she left you. Everything. I stared at her, the words bouncing off the walls of my disbelief. I don't understand, I whispered. She smiled faintly, tears catching the light. Sit back, dear boy, Eleanor said softly, because there's so much you were never told. And as she began to speak, the room around me seemed to fade, the sterile light, the humming machines, the faint scent of antiseptic, although dissolving into the sound of a past that had been waiting for me all along, a secret locked away in a box, a family I never knew, and a truth that would rewrite everything I thought I understood about who I was, and why. My father spent his entire life running. The envelope trembled in Eleanor's hands, and for the first time in years, my heart started to beat for something other than loss, but I didn't know then that opening that envelope would change everything. And they say some secrets are buried so deep that not even time can erase them. But sometimes fate has other plans. It started with a single envelope, old, yellowed, and heavy with the weight of decades. The kind of envelope you feel before you even open it. You don't just see it. You sense. It's about to change everything. Ryan, the frail voice said, trembling but determined. There's something you need to know about who your mother really was and why she made the choices she did. That's when I knew this wasn't just another story about lost family. This was about legacy, about love so powerful that even death couldn't stop it. Eleanor's thin hands reached into her nightstand drawer. She pulled out that manila envelope like it was sacred scripture. The edges were soft from years of handling. Water stains marked it, the kind left by tears that had fallen long, long ago. She placed it in my hands. Your mother, she whispered, was Maria Blackwood. Before she became Maria Decker, that name hit me like a hammer. Blackwood, a name that carried weight, wealth, history. The Blackwood family owned half the commercial real estate in New England. Shopping centers, office towers, entire city blocks. Old money. The kind that didn't just vanish, it ruled generations. I stared at her, stunned. That's impossible, I said. My dad worked in an auto shop. We barely made rent, Eleanor's eyes softened. Because your father loved your mother enough to let her choose love over money. She leaned back, exhausted, but her words kept cutting through the years like a blade. Harold Decker was a mechanic at the Blackwood estate. He cared for their collection of vintage cars. Maria was 22, just back from college. They fell in love. But when her parents, Charles and Victoria Blackwood, found out, they gave her an ultimatum: her inheritance, her status, or Harold. She couldn't have both. Eleanor's voice trembled, but her eyes never wavered. Your mother walked out of that mansion with nothing but the clothes on her back. And she never looked back. I looked down at the envelope. But you said she left me. Everything. That's when Eleanor smiled. A secret smile that seemed to peel back the years. Oh, she did. Maria was smarter than her parents ever knew. Her next words rewrote my entire life. Her grandmother, Isabel Blackwood, left her a separate trust when she died, one that matured when Maria turned 35, independent, untouchable. Her parents couldn't touch a cent, and just like that, the world tilted. My mother, the woman I thought had nothing, had actually been the heir to an untouchable fortune. My fingers shook as I finally opened the envelope. Inside were crisp documents, legal papers, and a single handwritten letter, cream-colored stationery. The words, Maria Elizabeth Blackwood. "Read the letter first," Eleanor whispered. "The rest will make sense after." I unfolded the paper. My mother's handwriting, delicate, looping cursive, reached across time itself. "My dearest Ryan, if you're reading this, it means I didn't survive to hold you, to see you grow, to be the mother I so desperately wanted to be." My throat tightened as I read her words. She'd written this 2 days before I was born. "I know I won't make it through childbirth," she wrote. "Call it intuition. But I need you to know, you are not responsible for my death. You are the greatest gift I could ever give this world." Her love poured off the page. Every word felt like it was written in blood and tears. "Your father doesn't know what I'm about to tell you," she continued. "I wanted us to build a life based on love, not money. My grandmother Isabel left me a trust worth $8 million, available when I turned 35. Since I won't live to see that day, I've arranged for it to transfer to you when you turn 33. $8 million. I stopped breathing for a second. But there was more. I've been investing secretly, tutoring, selling jewelry, saving every penny. I bought shares in Apple, Microsoft, Amazon. They're all in a portfolio under your name. I don't know what they'll be worth when you receive this, but I pray they give you freedom. Real freedom." I felt my heart pounding in my chest. My parents, your grandparents, believed money made them superior. They told me I'd regret choosing love over security. They were wrong. The only thing I regret is not being there to see you become the man I know you'll be. Her words broke me. "You are the son of Harold Decker, the best man I ever knew, and you are the son of Maria Blackwood Decker, who loved you enough to make sure you'd never have to sacrifice your dreams. Use this money to live freely. Use it to love without fear. And if you ever doubt yourself, remember, you were worth everything to me. My inheritance, my family name, my life." By the time I finished reading, my tears had soaked the page. Eleanor reached out, her papery hand gripping mine. "There's more," she whispered. I pulled out another document, dated just last month. A recent statement. At first, the numbers didn't make sense. Then they did, and I almost dropped the paper. The original, $8 million, had grown, through 4 decades of compound interest and stock growth, into $43 million. Eleanor's voice was soft but steady. "Your mother turned $8 million into $43 million because my late husband, Arthur Caulfield, was her financial advisor. He treated her trust like his own child. He's gone now, but the lawyers at Morrison Cranky have managed it ever since, waiting for you to claim it." The room felt smaller suddenly, spinning, alive with electricity. "This can't be real," I whispered. Eleanor just smiled sadly. "It's real, Ryan, every last cent, and there's something else." She handed me another document. My pulse quickened. "Your grandparents," she said. "Charles and Victoria Blackwood. They're still alive." Her words hung heavy in the air. "They live in the same mansion where your mother grew up. Charles had a heart attack last year. It changed him. They have no other children, Ryan. Maria was their only one. They've been looking for you." I sat there, trying to process a lifetime of truths unraveling in minutes. I thought back to that night at the restaurant. To Bridget, the woman who left me because she wanted someone on her level. The irony stung like fire. She had no idea how high that level really was. Why didn't my father tell me? I asked quietly. Eleanor's eyes shimmered with unshed tears. "He was protecting you. The Blackwoods broke your mother's heart. Maybe he wanted to keep you safe from that kind of pain." Maybe he wanted you to grow up knowing love, not rejection. Then her frail hand reached for mine again. Do you know why I kept searching for you all these years? I shook my head. Because I held your mother's hand as she died, she whispered, and with her last breath she made me promise you'd know you were loved. She made me promise you'd know you were worth everything. A promise to a dying mother is sacred. Her eyes were glassy now, her body trembling under the weight of memory. She lifted her hand, revealing a small silver key. This, she said, her voice barely a whisper, is for the safety deposit box at First National Bank. Inside, you'll find your mother's jewelry, including her engagement ring. She wanted you to have it, for when you find someone who loves you for who you are. I took the key, feeling decades of hidden love pressing into my palm. When I left Rosewood Gardens that night, the world felt different, heavier, brighter. My entire life had been rewritten by a story that began before I was even born. I sat in my truck for hours, just staring at the envelope on the seat beside me. $43 million. A number that no longer meant money. It meant love, devotion, sacrifice. My mother had loved me, $43 million worth. And I had never even known her real name. The next morning, I walked into First National Bank still wearing my delivery uniform. The same jeans, the same work shirt. The manager looked at me like I'd wandered into the wrong building. "Sir," he said sharply, "I think you're mistaken." But when I showed him the key and the legal documents with my name on them, his entire demeanor shifted in an instant. "Of course, Mr. Decker," he said suddenly, standing straighter. "Would you like to use our private viewing room?" Inside the vault, time seemed to slow. The safety deposit box slid open with a metallic click. And there it was, a simple diamond solitaire ring. My mother's engagement ring, worth less in dollars than it was in meaning. Then came the photos. Frozen moments from a life I never knew. My mother, radiant in a plain white dress. My father gazing at her like she hung the moon itself. Their wedding album, their smiles wide and unguarded. A photo of my mother, pregnant, one hand on her belly. On the back, in delicate script, "You're already so loved, little one." I found her jewelry, too. Heirlooms from her grandmother, Isabel. A pearl necklace, diamond earrings, a sapphire brooch. Pieces her parents couldn't take, no matter how much power they thought they had. Every item whispered the same thing. She loved you enough to plan for a future she'd never see. And as I sat there, surrounded by the echoes of a love story that defied time and money, I realized something that shook me to my core. The poor delivery driver who wasn't good enough for a high-society lawyer was actually richer than her entire firm combined. The man told he wasn't on her level. Could buy the building her office was in. But none of it mattered, because the true inheritance wasn't the money. It was the truth. The truth that love, real love, is worth more than any fortune, and that sometimes the greatest wealth we inherit is the love someone left behind. But as I held that ring in my hand, something caught my eye. A small envelope tucked behind the jewelry case. My name written on it. The handwriting wasn't my mother's. It was Eleanor's. My pulse quickened. I tore it open. Inside was a single line, written in shaky letters. "Ryan, there's one last secret your mother never told anyone, not even me." And beneath it, a second key. A key with a tag that read only 2 words. Blackwood Estate. I froze. What was hidden there after all these years? And why had my mother gone to her grave keeping it buried? The answers were waiting behind that door. They said I wasn't on her level, that I'd never be, and for a long time I believed them. But that was before. I opened the letter my mother left me and found out that the truth about who I really was worth more than $43 million. Not because of the money, but because of what it meant. Let me take you back. When my mother died, she didn't just leave behind memories, she left behind instructions. Every piece of jewelry, every document, every asset was handled with the kind of precision only someone who'd been planning for decades could manage. I wasn't ready for it then, but she had prepared everything for the day I would be. Each piece she left me had a handwritten note attached, neat cursive, the kind she'd practiced when letters still meant something. The notes told stories. Her stories. How she'd gotten this brooch from her mother on her wedding day. How this ring was pawned once, during a dark winter when the heat bill came before sentiment. How she bought it back years later, the day I was born. Every item had a history. A piece of her life I'd never seen before. It was as if she knew I might have to sell them someday. But she also knew I never would. Because they weren't just valuables. They were her. When I walked into Morrison, Cranky and Associates, the law firm handling her estate, I wasn't the same delivery driver everyone used to look past. Suddenly, the senior partners stood up when I entered the room. They shook my hand. William Morrison himself, a man who hadn't met a client face-to-face in over a decade, said to me, "We've been waiting for you, Mr. Decker, for a very long time." I didn't understand. Not yet. Over the next 3 days, they laid out paperwork that stretched across the entire conference table. Trust documents, transfer authorizations, tax filings, investment portfolios, offshore holdings, charity funds, property deeds. My mother, the woman who used to clip coupons at the kitchen table, had left behind an empire, and in that empire my name, Ryan Decker, was written over and over again. When it was all done, I signed the final document, the one that made it real, and the senior partner looked me in the eye and said, "Your mother wanted you to have more than money. She wanted you to have freedom." And for the first time in my life, I did, but I didn't run off to buy cars or yachts or houses. The first thing I did was find Eleanor Caulfield. Eleanor was my mother's oldest friend, her secret keeper, the woman who, for 35 years, had carried a promise she never broke. I moved her into the best private care facility money could buy. 24-hour nurses, specialists, fresh flowers in her room every single morning. When she saw it all, she tried to protest. "You don't have to do this," she whispered, her voice frail but proud. And I told her, "You kept a promise to my mother for 35 years. This is nothing. Compared to that." She lived 3 more weeks, and I was there for every day of it. When she passed, I was holding her hand, just like she once held my mother's. Her final words were a whisper that broke something open inside me. "Tell Maria I kept my promise." Maria. My mother. At her funeral, it was just me and Bethany, a nurse who'd cared for Eleanor in her final months. Everyone else, gone, forgotten, moved on. I paid for everything, not because I had to, but because it felt right. After that, I sat in my apartment surrounded by silence and realized I had a choice. Money or meaning. The fortune my mother left me was real. More money than I'd ever imagined. But it didn't feel real. It felt like numbers on a screen belonging to someone else. Someone I wasn't sure I wanted to become. I thought about Bridget, my ex, the woman who'd told me I wasn't on her level, that my delivery job was temporary, that my dreams were too small. When she found out, through office gossip, about my inheritance, my phone lit up. 17 missed calls, texts filled with half apologies, talk about misunderstandings, and we should talk. I didn't answer, not once. Instead, I bought the building where her firm's offices were located. Patterson, Cranky, and Associates. Her world, her pride, her identity. I didn't evict them. I didn't raise the rent. I didn't make a scene. I just owned it, quietly, completely. And every month when that rent check cleared, it wasn't revenge that made me smile. It was irony, because now she was paying me. But still, it wasn't enough. Money can buy silence, but it can't buy purpose. So I went back to what I knew best, delivering meals. But this time, it wasn't for a paycheck. It was for something bigger. I started a nonprofit called Maria's Table. Our mission was simple: deliver free, home-cooked meals to elderly people in hospice care, people with no one left, people like Eleanor, people like my mother could have been if she hadn't had someone to love her. I hired good people, real workers, drivers who deserved more than minimum wage and broken backs, $30 an hour, full benefits, retirement plans. Are you crazy? Jerome, one of my old construction crew buddies, laughed when I offered him the job. I grinned. Maybe, but I'm your kind of crazy. Walter Henning, a man who'd retired from the trade years ago, came out of retirement to help run operations. He looked at me and said, "Always knew you were meant for more than breaking your back in concrete," and I realized then I hadn't changed. The world had. A few months later, I got a call I didn't expect. Charles and Victoria Blackwood, my grandparents, the people who had once disowned my mother. They were old now, weak, living in a mansion with 14 empty bedrooms and enough regret to fill every one of them. When I walked into their house, Victoria's eyes filled with tears. "You look just like her," she said. "Just like our Maria." I told her the truth, calmly, quietly. "She wasn't yours," I said. "She was Harold Decker's wife. She was my mother, and you threw her away because she chose love over your money." Charles, confined to a wheelchair, reached out with trembling hands. "We were wrong," he whispered. "So terribly wrong. We lost our daughter over pride and prejudice that mean nothing now." And in that moment, I forgave them, not because they deserved it, but because my mother would have wanted me to. Forgiveness didn't mean reconciliation. It meant release. Every Christmas since then, I've sent them a card, a photo of Maria's table delivering meals, a reminder that their daughter's legacy isn't wealth, it's kindness. 6 months after Eleanor's death, I was delivering food to a new hospice patient. That's when I saw Bethany again, the nurse from before. Still caring, still gentle, still there for people no one else remembered. "Ryan," she said, surprised. "I heard what you did for Eleanor. That was beautiful. We had coffee, then dinner, then more coffee. She didn't care about the money. She cared that I still delivered meals personally, that I knew every driver's name, that I still kept my father's tools in my truck even though I'd never need them again." One evening, as we watched the sun melt into the horizon from my modest new apartment, she asked, "You could do anything. Why this?" I thought about it. Then I said, "Because my mother chose love over money, and never regretted it. Because my father chose dignity over disclosure. Because Eleanor chose loyalty over comfort. Because every person who truly loved me chose something harder than money." And that's when it hit me. This was my purpose, to make love easier for the people who came after. I heard that Bridget made senior associate recently, dating a hedge fund manager now, someone on her level. I hope she's happy. Truly, because if she hadn't walked away, I never would have discovered that I was already enough. My name is Ryan Decker. I'm the son of Harold Decker, the man who taught me that work has dignity, and Maria Blackwood Decker, the woman who taught me that love is worth every sacrifice. I deliver food to dying people because everyone deserves comfort in their final days. I have $43 million in the bank and calloused hands that I'll never hide. They said I wasn't on her level. They were right. I was never on their level. I was above it all along. Because real worth isn't measured in dollars or degrees. It's measured in promises kept, in love freely given, in the courage to stay true when the world tells you you're not enough. That's what my mother knew. That's what Eleanor lived. And now, it's what I believe. Some stories don't end with wealth or revenge. They end with peace. But sometimes, peace is just the beginning. Because when you finally know your worth, the world starts to change around you, and that's when the real story begins.